Our last presenter is from the future, and he's the CEO of Zen.digital, a New York-based software development and consulting firm who believes in the fusion of technology and beauty to create the finest interactive experiences. He's going to show us how you can use templates and services to create a mobile app in 45 minutes. Please welcome Daniel Zen.
Just want to make sure I'm on. Great. Sound great. So hi, I guess that was my intro. I'm Daniel Zen. So Zen.digital, we do a lot of web development, and we pretty much focus on the mean stack. So today I'm going to show how to take advantage of the mean stack using the Ionic Framework to create a web application or a hybrid application. I did a panel yesterday. I don't know how many of you were there, basically asking, do hybrid apps cut it? So I see a few faces that I saw yesterday. So here we are. We're going to quickly create a hybrid app. And in actuality, when I was preparing this talk, I realized I didn't even need 45 minutes. And as a consequence, there might be a choose-your-own-adventure portion towards the end where I ask you, what do you want me to cover after we've created this app? There we go. So I'm an MIT guy. I used to work at Pivotal Labs. And I've been working with AngularJS since the beginning. And so I formed the AngularJS meetup in New York. So if you're ever in New York, come to my meetup. And we focus on open source software, and that's one of the things I love about Ionic. It's an open source framework. And in my spare time, I'm also a magician and a fire performer when I'm not sitting here programming computer software. It's supposed to make me more identifiable. So let me get a little bit about you. So can I just get a show of hands? How many here are software developers? They actually code. They live in IDEs. Okay, that's good. It's almost 50. And then any managers here trying to find out more about Ionic? Okay, a small number. I see a couple. And then anybody in sales that wants to be able to describe this? No. Okay. And designers who are thinking that, okay, cool, nice to see. And then finally, this is kind of more important for the second half, the choose your own adventure part. Who here is like a mean developer that does not only Angular on the front end, but on the back end likes to use Node, Express, and Mongo? So that's going to kind of make me maybe choose a different adventure. Okay. So for this session, I'm hoping that you have project experience with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You'd be surprised how many people come to me to learn AngularJS or want to work with AngularJS but don't actually know JavaScript to begin with, and it's really kind of hard to jump into AngularJS without JavaScript. And then not only that, because Ionic is based on AngularJS, it's kind of nice to know some AngularJS as well, but I'll try and cover a little bit of that as we go along. And I'll take it slow. That's another way to do this adventure. Instead of trying to add stuff at the end, I'll just take what I got and slow it down. So we're going to be covering directives and controllers. I don't know if we have a service in this particular example, but there is a promises. And these are all part of like AngularJS, and JavaScript itself is heavy on promises these days. One would need to have, if you're going to take this lab, and the URL was given at the beginning and it'll be shown again at the end, if you're going to try and do this at home, you're going to need to have Node.js installed. And it's nice to have Chrome with a live reload extension, although for this example, I'm going to use the Ionic Lab, which is a great app now, recently released for Windows. It's been out for Mac for a while. And it's basically, I'll cover it in a little bit. It's a customized version of Chromium that's basically focused on displaying Ionic apps in progress. So I'm hoping by the end, you can understand Ionic's use cases and its great benefit. You could follow along, obviously, as I build a simple app with Ionic. Name some of the Ionic components, and you'll have a reference that you can look at to figure out how this stuff works and maybe be able to extend upon it and create your own apps. So we're going to create a to-do app. It's the standard. I've actually done it before for libraries, for synchronization libraries. But I usually skip over a lot of the concepts of how to create the actual app, and I focus on the synchronization when I give that talk. So instead, I'm really going to focus on how to build the Ionic app without any extra libraries or anything. And you'll be amazed at how little code is actually going to be used for this. So it's going to be data-driven. It's going to be interactive. We're going to be able to preview it in the browser, but like I said, I'm going to be using Ionic Lab, which you guys could download. It's a great little customized version of Chromium And we're going to be using directives that come with Ionic, such as ion pane, ion header bar, ion list, and ion item. And I created links here to all of these items so that if you wanted to, you could go and look at the documentation yourself. So everything here is hot linked, hyperlinked, so that you can just go and read the documentation. So this is not just a presentation. This really is a tutorial of sorts that you can use later. Okay, and we do have some services here, and they're the services that actually come with Ionic. There's the Ionic pop-up service and the Ionic list delegate, and we're going to be using those for some prompts and to be able to manipulate lists. Specifically, you'll see it shortly. So what is the Ionic Framework? I guess a show of hands so I don't bore you guys. Who here already knows what Ionic is? They've been looking at it and really curious. Wow, really only a small number comparatively. Okay. And then, okay, so let me go over this. Let me tell you what it is. So it's a front-end framework for developing hybrid mobile apps. So you might ask, what's a hybrid mobile app? So the concept of a hybrid mobile app is to be able to take HTML5 and JavaScript technologies and serve them up on a mobile application platform, most specifically iOS and Android, and be able to put it in the Play Store or the App Store and have it look just like any other native application that was written with Swift or Objective-C or Java in the case of Android, and also have access to all of the functions and the facilities of the phone itself, whether that be to be able to take a picture, to know when the phone is being tilted, to get the GPS location information, etc. So that's some of the advantages of a hybrid app is it's written in HTML, but still has access to the hardware. So as I mentioned, we're going to require Node.js for this particular lab, mostly for workflow. So we're actually going to be creating things with Node.js. Node.js is sort of used at the command line level to process files and to create things, as well as being able to be used as a server when you use the mean stack, where it actually is your web server doing processing and data access and authentication. But in this case, we're just using it the command line locally on the local machine. So if we want to build an iOS app in the end, we're going to need OS X. We're going to have Xcode installed along with the command line tools. And there's links here on where to get them. All of that is available for free if you are using a Mac. And for Android, you're going to need the Android Software Development Kit. And once again, this is to build the final app. We're going to be able to preview and look at the app and see what it's going to look like in its final form without actually having to compile for iOS and without having to compile for Android. So that's what I'm saying here. You can still create, view, and debug many apps in the web browser without actually needing the full development libraries. But once you start accessing the hardware functionality that's available only on the phone, then you're going to need to actually be working in those build environments. So I've already done this, but if you were to install Ionic, you also need Cordova. Cordova is also sometimes known as PhoneGap. You might have heard Adobe now owns the license to PhoneGap, so Apache now has the open source version, which is called Cordova. So using the Node Package Manager, or some people argue NPM stands for something else, we can install globally with the -G Ionic and Cordova. And if you're running on Windows, you don't need sudo. In fact, if you're using Homebrew to install on OS X, you don't really need sudo. But this is usually what you see when you go and look at how to install this stuff. And this will install the basic modules needed to work with the Ionic Framework. It's open source, great for building the native mobile applications using the technologies you probably already know if you're here at a web conference. And so now we can begin building apps with Ionic. So Ionic ships with several templates. It's actually only a really small number, only a few. We can create a blank app using the command line you see here. So I could go to the command line, and it'll take a few seconds, so maybe I should do that right now. But I also want to now bring up this concept of Ionic Lab, which I said I was going to tell you about. I only started using it recently, and it's pretty cool. Ionic Lab, let me put it on the screen for you guys to see. So hopefully that's large enough. Yeah, it looks like it's large enough for you guys to see. Basically, it allows you to quickly preview an application and it allows you to create a new application. It's kind of like a WYSIWYG, not quite an editor, but it's more like a WYSIWYG preview for installing plugins into your Cordova, or rather your Ionic environment, starting and stopping the web server that serves up the app locally, being able to emulate inside of the iOS simulator, or being able to run it inside of an Android device or an Android simulator. And it has a quick button here to just build the app that you're working on. And one of the things that Ionic has worked on recently is the ability to upload your Ionic application into the cloud for preview on any device, as long as that device has installed an app that's in the App Store and the Play Store called Ionic View. And the advantage here is you can start testing your application without having to go through the process of getting your app into the Play Store or the Android Store, or even dealing with the beta processes for that. So that's a huge functionality. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to build iOS devices, iOS applications, but typically in beta mode, you're collecting everybody's unique identifier and injecting it into the code, and it's a huge pain in the ass. So that's huge functionality, and this little lab here, besides giving you a quick preview of the app you're working for, once again, there's no way to edit the code in this particular lab functionality. It's more, but I can create a new application, so let's do that. I'm going to create my app, and I'm going to use a blank starter. So this is similar to this basically does this first command here, but from a GUI environment. So it's kind of neat. I'm going to say enable SAS and enable Cordova, and I click create app, and now it's starting to create it, and you can actually, if I click this button here, you can see the output here. It's actually creating it on the file system, and then I'm going to show you the files that it's created. So it's kind of a neat little capability here. Maybe I can. I created right in the FITC folder. I seem to make that mistake a lot, but that's fine. So here are the files that it's actually created so far. And I'm a big user of WebStorm, so I'm just going to open up this app, this brand new blank Ionic app in WebStorm. And give that a second to open. And then finally, one of the cool things is if I click on this serve button, it's going to run a web server locally and then display the app right there. So right now, this app I just created by just clicking some buttons inside of this tool, that is a preview of this application. Once again, I can't actually edit the code here, but I get to see and quickly preview it. So as I mentioned, I'm going to use WebStorm to actually bring up the code, and that's popping up on my screen right now. And I'm going to basically be looking at, I'll bring that over so you can see the file structure. And I hope that's large enough for everybody to see. So on the left, I've got the tree pane of all the files that are in this blank Ionic template ready to go for me to create my application. So it's got a lot of boilerplate code that's been generated for me. But the two places I'm going to be editing are index.html here. That's where I display my main code, and you can see here's where we see the title, Ionic blank starter. Can everybody read that, or should I try and, okay, glad. If somebody in the back row says they can read it, then I'm sure everybody can. So because that's actually where Ionic blank starter. So if I edit that, I'm just going to remove the word starter for starters. And then I'm going to switch to here, and it automatically updated. I didn't even hit save because WebStorm has been designed to automatically save whenever it loses focus. And then Ionic Lab has been set up to automatically refresh whenever it sees a change to the file. So I'm going to get this live reload functionality I'm looking at so I can do continuous integration and see what's going on. So now that I've set up my environment, now let's actually get to coding our app. So as I mentioned, there's going to be two files I'm going to be editing. One is this index.html, and I'll go over the structure of it. And then just so I have it open and ready to go, there's app.js here as well. And app.js is basically here's where I'm hoping you guys already know Angular. And if you don't, I'm going to try and take it slow. But basically, Ionic is based on the Angular framework, and it gives you all these amazing widgets to very quickly put together mobile applications that look really good, if you ask me. So back to our actual presentation in progress. So I didn't need to hit Ionic Serve or any of this because I did this all from Ionic Lab. I just hit serve and got this will open up the blank app in your default browser. Instead of a default browser, I just did. In fact, let me show you one other thing about this Ionic Lab. I mentioned that it was nothing more than a glorified Chromium browser, and one of the ways you can actually see that is I can toggle the dev tools, and by toggling the dev tools, I'm actually seeing what looks like the Chrome development tools right there. So what you see is this is nothing more than a customized version of Chrome. The dev tools are actually there, and you can actually look at the console output and see what's going on. But I'm going to hide that for now. Okay, back to my presentation. So what are the contents of a blank Ionic app? We've got Ionic's CSS, cascading style sheets, and there's also our own style.css, which starts off blank. If we want to do any customizations, we put it in style.css. There is the Ionic bundle.js, and this accomplishes two things. It is basically one file that has the Cordova libraries, and the Cordova libraries, once again, is what allows this web application to be able to run to look like a native application, basically essentially become a hybrid app on iOS or Android. So it's bundled all of that together. Then we've got, so it's Ionic and AngularJS, and then Cordova is actually what allows that to happen. So Cordova.js is not actually needed for the preview inside of the browser mode. Cordova is going to be needed when you're actually running on iOS or Android. But, oops, I didn't mean to go to the next slide yet. But the bundle has both Ionic and Angular, and we're going to need those at all times. App.js I opened up. It's a very short little starter app made with Angular.js specifically for Ionic. And it also already has the Cordova keyboard plugin ready to go. The keyboard plugin was something that was created as part of the Ionic project because they realized when they opened up the keyboard, it was sometimes covering portions of the screen where you were doing your input. And so there were errors that were happening in terms of user interface, things that didn't happen normally in a native application. And the Ionic team said, we want to solve this problem. They created this keyboard plugin that specifically enables the focused area to remain on the screen when the keyboard opens. So if the focused area is going to be covered by the keyboard, this plugin will automatically pop the focused area into so that it's still visible. And that's kind of an important feature when you're creating a hybrid app. You don't want suddenly the keyboard to cover your focused area where you're typing. And then ng-app. This is, once again, you really kind of need to know a little bit about Angular.js here. This is the bootstrapping mechanism for Angular. There. So ng-app is the auto bootstrapping mechanism for AngularJS. So since Ionic apps are written in Angular.js, we need to have ng-app where we define what application is actually running inside of this web view. And we also make use of these directives that come from Ionic, the Ionic pane, Ionic header bar, and Ionic content. So let's just take a look at the index.html of our app. Once again, this is all part of the blank template. So we haven't actually written any code yet. This was all just given to us. So this is the app.js. And here we see ng-app. We've got which says, hey, we're going to run a starter app here. And inside the body, we have a pane. Inside the pane, we have the header bar, which you've already seen. We've changed the title on the header bar once already. And then we have the content area, which is currently blank. And we can see all that right here. This is the Ionic blank with a blank pane right there. Okay. So there's also the ability to have colors, and the colors in Ionic are based on moods, as opposed to actually naming something red or blue. And this allows you to kind of rename recolor the mood to a different color if you want. So let's change the color of our header. Anybody want to choose a color? First one shouted out wins. What was that? Royal. So royal it is. So I just come over here, and where I says bar stable, instead I'm going to say bar royal. And if I go back to the lab, instantly it changes. That's the advantage of the live reload functionality. Okay, so and here's the list of colors, and of course, once again, this is hyperlinked. You can go right into the documentation from this lab so you can see more about it. So we changed the title. Next. So now we have this Ion list and Ion items. So the list is a widely used interface element, and we can include basic text, buttons, toggles, icons, and thumbnails. So what we're going to do in this case is just cut and paste this code here into the pane. Let me make sure I have access to that text, otherwise I have to close down the presentation. So I'm copying that text right now. There we go. And then I'm going to bring up WebStorm. And here's the content. And so the exact same thing you just saw on the screen, I just copied that into there, and then I go back to the Ionic Lab. Bam. So if anybody has any questions, obviously I can answer that. But basically all I did was I added a bunch of items into item 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I put them in a list. I put the list in the pane, and we can see it. So here's where I kind of digress to tell you that there's other ways to create Ionic apps. There is the Ionic Creator. It's not really ready for prime time if you ask me, but it's a really cool way on the web to mock up an Ionic app. And then you can export your mock-up to code just like this blank template and edit it further from there. So it has a drag and drop interface. It exports to real code, as I mentioned, and it's free to use. I'm just going to bring that up so that you can see it. So here is, let me see if I can. There we go. So it's telling me this is the home page for it, creator.ionic.io. It says sign up, but of course I'm already signed up, so I'm going to skip that step. It says just go straight to the builder. And I was working on an app earlier, but I'll just show you this. This, once again, it looks a lot like Lab, but Lab has no programming capabilities, and it certainly doesn't have the drag and drop capabilities that you're seeing, that you're going to see right here, right now. I can actually drag and drop content, and I can't really code, but I can sort of change this content where it says 1, I could say, A, and so it's really great for quickly creating a mock-up of something. I can put a checkbox in somewhere. So they created this, like I said, I don't think it's ready to create a full-blown app, but it's definitely ready to create the outline of an app if you're not ready to do the HTML that I'm showing you guys. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I just want you to know it exists and that you can use it to create mock-ups. Okay. Also, there's the Ionic Marketplace. So the Marketplace comes with starters for Ionic apps, plugins, and themes. You can actually package up your code and sell it. I'm not really big on purchasing plugins, but if somebody can give me something that gives me the functionality I need quickly, I would do it. There's lots of great things. I'll just quickly open it up so that you guys can see what's available. So discover, share, Ionic, and then you can see here like they have like a Tinder mock-up, they have timeline, they have a music app that you can quickly start, a framework you can start with, color picker functionality, so you can, and so if I click on color picker, let's say, because that's something I wanted, they're charging $5 so that I could get this color picker widget and drop it into Ionic. So this, Ionic is an open source platform, so this is one of the things that they've done to try and create a marketplace so that they can make money. So, because, as some people were mentioning, I think Brian over there, they're not 100% sure that their business plan is going to work, but so this they've got all this stuff for free right now, and they're hoping that they can generate a revenue stream. And this is partly how they're going to do that. So, and you can actually package something up and put it in the marketplace and just give it away. There's no requirement that you sell it. Ionic View, I already discussed sort of at the beginning, allows you to preview your app on a live device and bypass the app and Play Store, and great for clients and testers. Okay, so now we're actually going to write some code. This is more than just HTML. This is the very first bit of JavaScript code, specifically Angular code that we're adding in. So we're going to make our app data-driven. Instead of just cutting and pasting the static test that was like item 1, item 2, item 3, now we're actually creating an array of tasks. Each task has a title and whether or not it's been completed. And we can see the first task has actually already been completed. So I'm going to cut and paste this code. Hold on while I copy that code, but everybody sees it on their screens, so I'm going to leave that there. So I'm copying that code, and then I'm going to put that code directly into the app.js that I was working with over here. So here's app.js. I'd love to see if I can. I'm going to see if I can make that just a little bigger, but no, I think I can go to full screen. That might go to present. No, I think if I go to presentation mode. So whatever. So now I'm going to drop that in. So right here, I'm creating. No, that's the wrong bit of text, though. There's my controller, yeah. So what we just saw on the slide, I'm now dropped in here. So I now have a controller called the ToDo controller, which has, inside of the scope, has an array of tasks. And now I just need to actually have that be displayed, because if I go and do a preview, it doesn't change. It looks the same, because I haven't yet told the front end to take this data that's in the scope and show it. So that's the next thing on my agenda here. Instead of using the separate ion items, we're going to use an ng repeat. This allows me to go through one by one and iterate through the items inside of the tasks array and display them inside of the app. So I'm just going to copy this little bit of HTML, and inside of WebStorm. So now inside of my index.html, I'm going to replace the individual items, that item 1 through 5, and instead I now have this ng repeat of an ion item that actually is going to look at the tasks array in the scope. And for each task, it's also going to set a class. And that class is going to say it's going to add this class completed if the task is in fact completed. Remember to add the ng controller attribute to the body. So let's go back and actually do that. So I have to tell it to use the ToDo controller, and then bam, first, second, and third will appear. But notice I said that the first task was completed, but it hasn't yet displayed that way. And that's because I haven't included the CSS so that when a task is completed, that it'll look differently. So that's actually the next item on my list. So let's add this, the CSS here. So I'm copying that CSS, and this is the third file that we're actually going to edit in, and that is the style.css here. We're adding complete, make the color gray, and put a line through it. So if we go back to the preview, now the first item you can see actually is grayed out and has a line through it. So now I want something to happen when I actually click on my tasks. This is where we make it interactive. So if I click on these tasks, nothing happens, but I want to be able to toggle their state. So I only have to add a little bit of code here. ng click task completed. So I'm going to copy that and insert it into the index.html right here. So now, when I click on the items, they will toggle their state. And once again, since it quickly reloads, we get that functionality instantly. Can I get time? Is it 10? Okay, so I guess I went slow, but so let's add a button to the header that allows us to actually create a new task. I'm going to go through this a little quicker so that we can actually get the fully functional app by the end. So now here we are in the header bar, and we add this button, and let's preview it. And then we see this new button here. And let's actually give the button some functionality. So when I click on it, I'm going to create a new task. And so here's the code to create a new task. And I'm copying that. That code into app.js inside of the controller. So now I have a new task functionality. What does it do? It pops up a pop-up, and let's not forget that because of dependency injection, I actually have to declare the Ionic pop-up here, that's saying I want access to that Ionic pop-up. So let's look at the functionality now. I get all this extra functionality from that little bit of code. I actually have a prompt. I can enter a new task. I can say hello, and I can say create task, and bam, it adds it to my task list dynamically. So let's look at that again. We create a pop-up with a title, a template. Okay, so now quickly I want to be able to delete a task. So we're going to create a new button, delete, and we're going to add this to the items. And that's in index.html. So here's the items. And so this is called a option button. And if we go and preview what it looks like, now suddenly I've added in the ability to get a delete functionality. All I did was add in this little bit of code with an arrow to the left, and I made it assertive so it would be red. And what it actually does when I click is it splices the task right out of the array. So it's actually already ready to work. Let's actually click on, and bam, I'm able to delete an item. So how much time have I got? Oh, 4 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to actually now put the edit functionality in. So I'm moving a little, I guess, I went slow, and now I got to, and then we're pretty much done with our app. And I'll open it up to questions. So once I have edit functionality, I'm kind of done. So now edit. I need a new button. And you can see it's energized, so it's going to be yellow, because that kind of makes sense. And so now, right underneath where I have delete, I'm going to put edit, and let's take a look at what that looks like, because we get an instant. Now I have both delete and edit functionalities, but when I click on edit, it's not going to work yet, because I need the code to actually edit. And here's the code to bring up an edit prompt. So I'm going to copy that and put it into my app. And so in app.js, underneath new task, I've now created edit. And so now, when I actually click on edit, it actually brings it up, and I can say, instead of first, I want to call it 1, and I click OK, but it didn't close the menu, but it did change it. So the last thing I need to do is make sure that it automatically closes. So how do I get that going on? Here we have this Ionic list delegate, which is a service that allows us to manipulate the option lists there. So I'm going to copy this command, Ionic list delegate, close option button. And notice the last thing it says is don't forget that to gain access to it, you need to do a dependency injection, which means adding it to the list. So here, after I've edited my task, I want to close That's going to close the option button, so it slides to the right. And then in order to have access to this, I need to declare it here, and that's using dependency injection. So now I should be able to do the exact same thing I did before, say edit, and let's call it, let's say, I don't know, 2. And when I click OK, it actually closes the option buttons for me. So, I just quickly created this app. This app is ready to go. I can now build the app. I could display it in the iOS simulator. I could display it in the Android simulator. I could upload it and use Ionic View to be able to show it on a real device. I could submit it to the App Store or the Play Store. 45 minutes. How did I do? So let me open this up to questions. Obviously, this is available online, the talk. If anybody has any questions on this or anything else related to Ionic, please let me know. Really? Nobody's got any questions at all?
So to style it in a different way, what do you recommend? Do you have like templates?
So once again, in the marketplace, they have all these different templates that you could use. There's also, they have the ability, they have a few CSS options to make it look very much like an Android app. In fact, one of the options is material design. They actually now have a material design plugin for Ionic that makes things look like material design. So it makes it really easy to create Android-looking apps. You wouldn't know. That's one of the questions that came up during the panel was, I don't see a lot of hybrid apps, but how would you know? If you made it look like material design and you put it in the Play Store, you wouldn't know it was a hybrid app. Also, this is kind of more of an iOS look and feel. One of the options here is to say, this is the Android version versus the iOS version. You'll notice the only difference is the centering of the title, but there's actually other differences. When you create a toolbar, I believe the standard for iOS is the toolbars go at the bottom. The standard for Android is the toolbars go at the top. So it actually takes that into account when creating the Android version versus the iOS version. And of course, you can change the colors easily, but you can look, it's basically all CSS. Any other questions? Yes? Well, it really depends on what your goals are. And this actually came up at the panel yesterday. If you're trying to do a lot of computationally intensive processing and you need access to the core CPU or GPU, then maybe Ionic isn't for you. But most business applications do not do that. They're just data-driven, authentication, get something, modify it, update. So in most cases, you're not going to see the limitations. For instance, I described a situation where one of my clients was doing encryption with a JavaScript library, and they needed a plugin basically to get access to the core encryption functionalities that was available on the platform. So if you're doing something really computationally intensive, that's a limitation. I'll take one last question and then we're done. Really? That's it? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm Daniel Zen. I hope this was educational. Thank you very much.